Okay, so now we're going into week 5 and 6. So we're going to basically start off with direct and indirect lighting. So direct lighting means that we have like a direct light source, let's say the sun, and the sun is beating down on, I don't know, a house or a car or a person, and it's going to just have a very intense shadow. So right over here I have a little setup where I have direct lighting on this ball right here, and I think you can see that we have a pretty intense shadow. So let's take a look at this. So you can see that the light is mainly coming. Yeah, so in this situation, I had some problem with my sound. So what I'm trying to explain here is that because we have very direct lighting, we have a very hard shadow. And I'm explaining that you want to try to soften the shadow anyway, just because if you draw it as hard as you may be seeing it, it looks kind of strange. The other thing I'm explaining here is that if you look at sort of the underside of the ball, you can see a little bit of reflection from the table up onto the underside of the ball. You're seeing a little bit of light basically bouncing off the box and into the bottom of the ball. Then here I'm just moving the light away, and then you can see that that hard shadow is gone, right? There's no more hard shadow on the left there. You're still seeing a little bit of darkness underneath the ball, and it's important to draw in that darkness. But you don't want to overdo it either when you're drawing that, because the reflection in here shouldn't be brighter than the lightest areas right up in here. Now let's see what happens if we put like a white piece of paper down, and what does that do in terms of both the shadow. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, so you're seeing even more of a reflection underneath it. And if we put, let's say, a dark area underneath it, so we'll put this dark book underneath it, and what does that do? So you'll notice that the shadow is a little less intense there. It's a little less obvious, and there's just a little bit less of a reflection underneath it. It's interesting actually, because there's a little bit of reflectivity to the surface of this book. You might be able to see a little bit of actually the white of or the gray of this ball right in here. But that's another class coming up where we're going to talk more about that, reflections on surfaces. But yeah, the light is bouncing all over the place. It's very interesting the way that works. Okay, so we're going to try to draw some of this. So we're going to go back to over this direction. This is going to be, the light is coming down this direction. And you can tell that it's going to hit all kinds of surfaces here. So it's going to hit a little bit here. That's going to bounce back up, and that's why you have sort of a light area under here. It's going to be the lightest right here. That's where the light is most hitting, and it's going to be the darkest under here, and this is going to be where our shadow is. Dark shadow right here, and we have this very dark surface area right here. That's the main shadow. So the light is coming straight down, and the shadow is going right to about here. And then there we have like this little quarter, eighth moon of darkness right under here. So this is our ball overall. And let's see if we can fix some of this stuff. And then we have a little bit of a background here. And then we have some midtones right about here. And we can put in a little bit of a reflection under here. Remember there was that little reflection. And then there's some darkened areas right around here underneath. And then usually on the edges, it's just a tiny bit darker than right where we're seeing it in the middle. But this idea of being able to kind of just notice light, notice how light really works is important. So actually I'm seeing the reflection a little bit lower below here. And this area doesn't go dark quite so far. And my ball is not perfectly ball. It's not a perfect cylinder anymore. It's not a perfect round shape anymore. Let's see if we can fix that a little bit. This needs to go in a little bit. Yeah, what's it do? That's what he's done. All right, so that's direct light. Let's do right now. So we will move over here a little ways. And I'm going to move my setup so I can actually see what that looks like. So yep, there's just like a little bit of darkness on the bottom there. So it's just kind of dark on the bottom. And then it's a little bit dark on this side. But the background is kind of dark too. And the background's kind of dark. So that's really dark. And what I'm going to do is try to fix the shape a little bit. Use my razor. Get in your hand. And where's the light on the top? I'm drawing my razor right now. Still a little reflection on the bottom of this thing. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, it kind of looks like a ball with a little bit of a shadow underneath. I think that on some level, it's almost a little too much shadow under there, even though definitely there is. Yeah, I don't know. Now notice the edges that I'm doing. I don't have a hard edge on this thing. If I wanted to, I could make the whole background like just sort of smoothed out with my cloth here. But the quality is like, for a lot of drawing, you don't actually have to have a line for the edge. I mean, people think you really do, but you don't. You can still see that that's ball even without necessarily an edge there. You can put in a little bit of darkness for the edges. A little bit darker down, especially as it goes downward. But you just have to keep on fixing till you kind of get it right. I think that the left side still is a little bit darker than the right in the situation that I'm in. So I'm going to just kind of put a little more darkness down here. But there is definitely a little bit of a reflection on the bottom, but it's just super subtle. All right, well, let's call it a day for that. Basically the homework is to really try to find some objects and then try to draw those objects, whether it's a ball or maybe some other object or both. But try to put them in and try to get these darks and lights in. Remember the darks and lights are, you got your super darks, you got your mid-tones, and then you got your super lights. And then there's usually like some kind of a background that these super darks, mid-tones, and lights exist within. So try to do all that. And then use an eraser to get in the lights. You can use a rag to kind of make transitions. And then just try to see the light. Like just think about, where is that light bouncing? Is the light bouncing off the table here and then coming in here? Is it bouncing off maybe the wall? Is there maybe a window open somewhere and then it's bouncing a couple times from the window? What's the direction of the light and where is it bouncing from? All right, well, that's week 5. Let's go on to week 6. So your homework for week 5 is just find some objects and notice the directness or indirectness of the light. How intense is that light? How fuzzy is that shadow? Week 6 is composition. So what does composition really mean? Composition means that when your eyes are looking at an object, you're looking at that object within a certain frame. I mean, unless you're looking at a piece of sculpture, which might not be directly framed. But for our situation, we're usually looking at something within at least a square or rectangular piece of paper or canvas. And what that means is that our eyes are kind of going around in circles usually. So if this is let's say the frame right here, right? We got this kind of like square frame. Our eyes are kind of like moving in a circle right here. So if we have, let's say, a tree right here, our eyes would go to that, and then they might go off and look at some clouds, and then they might go off and look at a house over here. And there have been kind of, as part of tradition, various ways of organizing composition. For example, one of the most famous compositions is the triangular composition. So this is kind of a triangular composition. What you normally have is you'd have Mother Mary right here. She's holding a little baby right here. And then you'd have an angel, you know, right here. And then maybe another angel right here. Right, this is just, and then this sort of triangular composition is meant to show like a certain amount of stability in the frame, and it shows maybe stability of the society that's being depicted here. But let's look at a few other forms of composition that have become very popular. One example is what we call the rule of thirds. So with the rule of thirds, what we do is we chop our canvas into 3 parts. And those 3 parts, so we see it's kind of like the French flag here, right? This is our frame. This is our frame, and then this is our French flag here. And then we also chop it in thirds this way. So we have maybe a horizon line right here, and then, I mean, it doesn't have to be a horizon line. It could be like the bottom of the floor, or it could be I don't know, just it could be really anything. But anyway, the most important areas in the rule of thirds are right in these 4 spots. So for example, in this example, I have a lighthouse, and I have like the light of the lighthouse is coming out right here at this spot. And then this is kind of like the main structure of the lighthouse. And then let's say right here we have a cliff coming down. And then right here we have the ocean, right? We have the ocean, the seas. And then maybe we have some more cliffs over here. And the house, because every lighthouse has to have an extra house that's attached to it. And then right here we might have some really dramatic clouds. You know, maybe, or we could have had birds there instead. But the idea is that these 4 areas are very important for the rule of thirds. Another important example of composition is what we call leading lines. So in leading lines, this is really great for using like 1-point perspective. These lines here kind of lead our eyes in a certain direction. Now, one thing that's important to think about is that you don't want your leading lines to like actually take you off the paper. Or, I mean, for example, let's say you had a character in your drawing. Okay, so here's your character. And your character is looking off, let's say, this direction. It's very strange that he's looking off this way, right? It's kind of like taking you out of the frame. You know, unless you have like a really good reason. You want to keep people in the frame. You want to keep things, you want basically to stay in the frame and then maybe go to something else in the frame, but you want to stay within that frame. So maybe you could have a character here, but he would be looking this direction. So he'd be looking back maybe, I don't know, at a house right here. But you stay within the frame. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, it's getting all kind of sketchy here. Let's see, another example of composition is what we call framing. So right down here, I've drawn a little house being framed by trees. All right, so this one's called framing. So here's the frame itself. And then we have a tree. So we're trying to frame our little house in the woods here. Here's a little house. You know, it's a cute little house. It's got like a little back porch or whatever here. And we got a tree right here. You can see that branches kind of frame the house, maybe some leaves. We got maybe some more leaves here. We have a couple other trees. And these leaves kind of frame the house. These leaves kind of frame the house. Maybe a little fence right here. So the idea is that this house has plenty of company. It's nice and happy in this scene with all the stuff kind of around it. And one more example of composition, and this is difficult to do, but it can be very effective if you got it down. It's called negative space. And I drew one right here. So this is just basically, here's the frame. But we got a little tree right here. And you know, I kind of got this idea off the internet. but it's basically kind of existing in the water here. And there's like a little bit of a hilly background. So let's see if I can find it. But I actually had a book here that I thought gave some really good examples of negative space. This is from a Frederick Remington book. But like this book, this picture right here really gives good examples of this negative space in the snow. So he really uses these sort of large areas of nothing, but it kind of works well. Like it basically shows like there's this atmosphere in here, but you don't really see it. You don't, it's just there, but it's actually like that negative area, right? That's why we call it negative, because there's really nothing there, but we're feeling it anyway. In this picture here, you also get a sense of it, right? In the sky especially. There's just sort of this blank sky, kind of a blankness around these mountains here. But it gives a sense of like the power of this sky kind of through the lack of actual action in other areas. So the most important thing about composition is really just thinking about how are you going to set up your composition and not getting too fancy about it. So let's actually go back to working with our little objects again. So we're going to go back to our objects in the distance and try to set up a few compositions. So let's turn our light around again. So here's, obviously, if there's just one object, that's one kind of composition. But the minute we put a couple other objects, so let's say this is right in the middle, and then we have two other things here. That could be kind of either the rule of thirds or a kind of triangular composition. Let's see, what other compositions could we do? How about we have a larger object in the middle? Larger object, that's definitely going to be a kind of triangular composition. Let's see, if we put an object, let's say like my pencil here, maybe that becomes leading lines, right? Well, there's a line here that's leading up here, up this direction. I have to take a look through the camera to see how that looks. It's a little wild looking actually, but yeah, there's something interesting about it. Think about also those shadows in the background kind of mean something. Yeah, that might work a little bit like the rule of thirds. So the bottom line is the line where these things are all kind of lined up on. Yeah, who knows? Something like that. Anyway, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to just try to do some compositions at home and just see what you can think of in terms of interesting compositions. So that's it. Week 5 and 6. Thank you very much.